Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live on Sky Sports.
Now then, you're very welcome back. Pat Nevin, good evening, hello.
And how are you, Joe? Are you well?
Very well, very well. Interesting times. So the weekend just gone, we had the likes of rugby and cricket and horse racing and golf and I guess ironically all the establishment middle class sports proceeding, Premier League and football at all levels, interestingly, right down to grassroots, decided to hold off. The rationale seems to have been the Queen and William are patrons of the FA and therefore that was the driving logic. It seems the Premier League only met for 20 minutes, although now next weekend's very much in jeopardy, so this will all be very condensed.
It will be. Certainly football can't actually say all the things it probably feels. There's a fear factor certainly involved in it as well. They didn't want to get it wrong because they'll get so much abuse if they get anything wrong. So they kind of they err on the side of caution, the football folks. So that's why everything was taken off. There is that huge fear that if there is a minute's silence, or hopefully these days a minute's applause, because a minute's silence is just too dangerous most of the time. It only needs one person or a couple of people, and everyone would say football's a disgrace. So that there was a delicacy there. There's no doubt. They didn't say that out loud because that sounds like football fans can't be trusted. And in actual fact, some football fans will say rightly, "Oh no, I don't feel that way. I don't feel the way other people do." But it would make the whole game look terrible. So I think that's one of the reasons why they've tried to be ultra cautious about it. But eventually, the games will need to start.
So football has this heightened sense of being likely to be criticised and publicly condemned,
definitely, 100%,
by comparison with rugby and all the other sports.
It has got a heightened sense of. There's no doubt about that, because whether it should or whether it shouldn't, you could argue all day long. But it has got that horrible heightened sense because in the past, things have gone wrong in football a lot more regularly with people have used football. And certainly all the way back to when I played, people did use it and embarrassed the game, embarrassed all of us. And, it's not like that anymore, or not as bad anymore. But certainly the fear factor would have been part of the reason why some of the games went off. But now it's more a case as we go forward. It's about policing issues, etc. It's have they enough police to be able to police the games? Specifically, the London games are going to be difficult, around the time of Queen Elizabeth's funeral.
Well, the latest reporting, so Arsenal PSV is off on Thursday. That's a London game. It would seem Manchester United Leeds again Sunday now expected to be off as well, based on conversations between the two clubs. Certain games require more of a police presence, so it seems the Queen will be lying in state for the next couple of days, and there will be, Pat Nevin, I don't know if you'll be in the queue, I suspect not, 20-hour queues to see the Queen lying in state. So if that lives up to its billing, that is a lot of police, and so all
it's complicated. Policing always takes precedence. Again, back to times when I was the chief executive of a club, everybody thinks it's the FAs and the leagues that make the decisions. In the end, the police can just say no, and that's you're stuffed. There's nothing you can do. Absolutely nothing you can do. You don't even need to give you a reason. And quite often, my memory is we didn't get a good reason. We got this is why we're doing it. If you come back with anything, they didn't discuss it or argue it. You just say, this is why it's happening. And off they go. And, you see your stuff, really. And, I understand it, because to some degree, the policing is going to have to be kind of huge for what's going to be going on in London, I suspect. But it's kind of weird, because every football fan feels the same now. I'm off to Chelsea for the game Wednesday night against Salzburg. I think I'm supposed to be going down to Spurs at the weekend. I think. Liverpool, Chelsea, I think. I don't know. And many people, I'm all right. I'll deal with it. But there's many people that are flying in from all over the world and have planned these for a long time. It's tough. It's really, really tough for football fans. It always has been, but this is a particularly difficult time.
So in the past week, Chelsea have lost and found a new manager. As you said, they play Salzburg Wednesday, and then Liverpool need to reboot their season pretty quickly. They play Ajax Anfield tomorrow. Let's start with Chelsea then. Thomas Tuchel has released a statement saying this is one of the most difficult statements I've ever had to write. It's one I hoped I would not need to do for many years. I am devastated my time at Chelsea has come to an end. This is a club where I felt at home, both professionally and personally. It was interesting over the weekend. Jonathan Northcroft, for instance, had a really interesting piece in the Times. And he was certainly reporting a sense that Tuchel and Bowley was a case of water and oil. And we'll come on to Bowley and why he's picked Potter. But in effect, it seems Bowley is more into holistic type of management. And that's one of the reasons he's picked Potter. So one of the anecdotes in the piece was that Bowley came on the team bus after Chelsea had been beaten by Arsenal 4-0 on a pre-season tour. And he offered, as Jonathan Northcroft reports, reassuring words to the players, as in, not the end of the world and, everyone's great. Tuchel apparently was scoffing at the speech when Bowley left the bus. This was not the way that Tuchel obviously would have viewed a 4-0 defeat. So it seems this was just a mixture that was never going to last very long.
No, and I've got this horrible feeling where I've been there before, and it's so close to something I've lived through. I mentioned the fact of my time at Motherwell when and I came in as chief executive, and the owner had just bought the club, and there was a manager in place, and it was perfectly nice. It was perfectly okay, and it became so clear so quickly that wasn't going to work. There's nothing wrong with the guy, nothing wrong with his management. It just wasn't of the same viewpoint, ethos, you name it, whatever you want to call it, holistic approach, you can call it anything you like, but it was really, really clear that wasn't going to work. And I'm sitting there going, I'm chief exec, I'm going to have to sack this guy if we can't find a way around this. And it wasn't nasty things, it was just a different view of how to go forward. One was, I wouldn't call it an old-fashioned view, but a very structured view of how you are a football manager. And there are kind of some incredible kind of echoes of that time for me, because Thomas, although I've talked to him a few times, and it surprises me slightly, he didn't want apparently any more control than just the team. And the idea of going out sourcing players and all that, he didn't want. That's so alien to what we think, certainly in the British game, because we think the managers want control and hands on everything, because in the end it all comes down in them. But some managers, certainly the guns for hire from abroad, they just want to do that job and concentrate on that job. And that really surprised me. And it's clearly not what Bowley wanted. He wants something, as you say, more holistic. It's a wider and bigger. And if I kind of drive that thought a wee bit further forward, it's clear that they've looked at where the success is with Manchester United, City, long-term manager, they know what the club's ethos is. Liverpool, long-term manager, then you know what they are, you know who they are, you know what they do. And they've stuck by the manager for a long period of time. So oddly, Chelsea get rid of the manager 100 days into the new regime, and people think, oh, it's just like the old one. You might be wrong. You actually might be totally wrong there. It may well be that they're trying to get rid of that concept and get somebody that they know they will work with long term. That's the theory.
Yeah.
Do you think it'll work?
Well, that's the question you're here to answer, because you've taken me exactly where I wanted to go. At a glance, when we first saw the Tuchel news, I thought, wow, this is just a continuation of Roman Abramovich. And actually, even old Roman might have thought that was a bit harsh on Tuchel. So the briefing, even looking at the dispatches over the last couple of days, the briefing is very much that this is going to be a slow-burning project. This is a culture shift for the club. Like the LA Dodgers, for instance, their coach has been in place for 6 years and counting. And the really interesting, Bowley has said of Potter, he has all the IQ. He also has the EQ, as in the emotional intelligence. And they have told Potter, even if you don't make Champions League, you're not getting the sack. This 5-year deal is very much a 5-year deal. So as you said, the burning question is what happens in May if they're sitting there and Chelsea finish 5th or 6th and Graham Potter is still espousing a more holistic viewpoint.
Exactly. And we wait to see that, because pressures will come if it's not successful, if there's not trophies, if there's not Champions League where the money really comes from, or a lot of the money comes from, although it would appear that Clearwater aren't exactly skint. So, the build will certainly go on a little bit. But it's easy to say that. Again, I go back to that time I came into that club. It's a smaller club, but the idea is, look, we're looking at this differently. We've got a mission statement, We're all inclusive. We are all the flowery stuff around it, right? We did all that. And then 2.5 years in, the manager and the chairman can't stand the sight of each other, hate each other's guts, because they're human beings. And that's what happens sometimes when there's pressure and the stress. So that's the sadness of it. The concept's great. The idea is brilliant. But the pressure cooker that is Premier League football at the top level just asks a different bunch of questions. I've not got great hopes. I hope that the ideal will work, because Chelsea have had this different ethos, and their ethos has been quite simple for the last 20 years. Win, win, win. That's the ethos. Everything else is kind of secondary or non-existent to some degree. You can, colour in wee bits of it if you like and make it look a wee bit more flowery, but that's been the ethos. They're looking at something slightly different now, and it's whether they can stick with that in the long term. And it's exactly, you're asking the question, do I think it'll work? Well, I like Graham Potter, I like his style, and I like the way he plays, and certainly there's one thing over and above everything else, absolutely over and above everything else about him. See this concept, see the teams that I think have not done well recently, like Manchester United, underperformed for such a long time. And you know me, I get fed up to the back teeth of the superstars saying, oh, I'm not being respected or not putting the work in. And I just don't go for it, do I? I'll have a go at Ronaldo, I'll have a go at Pogba, I'll just say, look, I'm not having it. You've got to be good enough and you've got to work hard enough, right? I don't care who you are. That's just the way it is. And it seems a wee bit of an old-fashioned attitude. No, it's not. That's Potter. That's Graham Potter, without a doubt. If it didn't matter how big a name he honestly, he want people who work solidly with him. He's got emotional intelligence and he'll try and bring people along. But eventually, he has got one base thing at the bottom of it. Got to be a team. And he absolutely lives for that. And he's right, because that's why Man City are successful. That's why Liverpool have been successful, because they're a team, they're a unit, they're a group.
Yeah, and Liverpool play Ajax tomorrow. Ajax in very reasonable form. They've won their past 7 matches. They've kept 5 successive clean sheets. They've scored 25 goals. They beat Rangers, obviously, in the opening round last weekend. So, they're not a better team than Liverpool, but they come in good form. And Liverpool are not Liverpool right now. So Klopp's been speaking today, and he was talking about 3-4 days of absolute truths over the last couple of days, cleared the air meetings. He said the Napoli game, he's watched it back several times now, the worst of his tenure. He said 8 out of the 11 players were below par and the other 3 were just normal. They weren't especially good either. The interesting thing he said in the aftermath of the game against Napoli was we have to reinvent ourselves, which seemed like very dramatic language. Several people have said, well, look, it's not his first tongue, so maybe he meant reinvigorate as opposed to reinvent. But regardless, there's something gone badly awry here at Liverpool. Do you suspect this is going to be a season-long issue? What do you think the issue is as well, I suppose, is the burning question? Well,
you and I have talked about the centre-back situation a few times, and I think you have to look there at the fact that Van Dijk hasn't had the same centre-back just about any weekend or 2 weeks in a row. It just changes all the time. That whole idea of the fullbacks flying forward and leaving no cover, everyone's beginning to see it really clearly now. And you're now individualising both of those centre-backs one-on-ones all the time. And it's clear what's happening, what those players are having to do. And whereas in times gone past they've managed it, it's getting harder now for them to manage that. Whoever's playing centre-back alongside Van Dijk, and of course Van Dijk's not quite as controlled and dominant as he's been in the past. It's hard for me to tell because I was at the 9-0 Bournemouth game and they looked pretty damn good in that one. And the thing I thought they'd been missing is creativity from midfield. And I've added a bit of creativity from midfield. The problem is that might have taken a little bit of the cover and dig out of there. Because if you're going to play with 2 flying wing backs and it's only a 4 at the back, one of those guys in those back line must cover. He must cover. The other night it was Milner trying to get there, wasn't it, all the time? But it's got to be someone who reads it and covers it and sees it and gets there. Because if you don't and you individualise 2 people, 2 and 2, 1 and 1, you will get done. You will get done. Sometimes it will happen. So I think there's got he wanted to make them a bit more creative, middle to front, but you got to look behind as well.
Yeah.
And so is it the players not being able to put it up to that level when they've been asked such high levels before? Maybe. Is it the manager saying, right, okay, I tried to adapt it to something else, but as I pushed that bit shoved out as well. Opposite force, strength. So it's really interesting to see. I still think there's a lot of good players there. I still think there's brilliant players there. I still think they'll be pretty successful this season. But it's clear that there is something not quite right. And it's, to me, I don't know if there's, even though I was clearly wanting them to create more from central midfield and from deep midfield, they also just got to shut the door. And I don't know if I shut the door well enough.
No, they've no legs in midfield. Like, James Milner can't be playing all these games. And I know in part it's down to injury, and the Keita situation is bizarre given that he's going on international duty for Guinea this month apparently, but isn't going to be involved for Liverpool until November, and he's not in the Champions League squad. So I don't know what's gone awry there. So lack of legs in midfield, but also a burning image from Napoli, for instance, is when that brilliant Georgian winger had this amazing game, Kvaratskhelia. We'll all be pronouncing his name much better, I suspect, over the months ahead. There was a point where he knocks it around Alexander-Arnold and goes around the other side of him. And, to be fair, Alexander-Arnold senses I'm probably beaten here. I'm unlikely to get back. But it was still a very dangerous moment in the build to one of the goals. And he just starts walking back. Doesn't even trot back. It's like, I'm out of the game here. Now, I understand the temperamental centre-forward who, does the whole, I've been, ball's gone ahead of me, I can only walk back now. But this was Alexander-Arnold, last line of defence. That just spoke of something really odd in that dressing room. And, we saw Milner with Van Dijk a couple of weeks ago at Old Trafford. There's something more than technical and tactical.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Alexander-Arnold one's interesting because a defender, and hey, by everyone listen here, football players, male, female, you don't care. If you're a defender and you lose it, you get back, don't you? That's what we all do. That's what you all do. And even a half-decent winger who gets beat, they'll try and get back, right? They just do it. That's what's in their blood, right, to do that, to defend. And the idea of someone getting beat and then not reacting, it's kind of weird. Like Robertson would never do that. Robertson, if he got beat, he'd get back there, get back there, get back there. You need to make up for it. Alexander-Arnold, he's just not a natural defender. He's not a very natural defender. He's more natural with all the play in front of him. I think everybody knows that. But he's always been seen as a decent defender. But to be fair, has he been asked that many questions that often? I go to watch Liverpool. He spends a vast amount of his time on the right wing, as a right winger, standing right up there. And when the ball goes down into that area, somebody else is going over and covering. So he's not really tested as often. And I suppose if you're not tested that often, you don't find out. But you cannot make those mistakes. And I think that Jurgen Klopp will continue to just get on the top of them, and it may well be that he just says to him at some point, look, okay, there's going to be a wee while where you're going to have to defend, and we might not get quite so many goals from you from those crosses, but choose your times to go as opposed to spend your time standing on the right wing for the entire game. And by the way, that's not a complaint against Alexander-Arnold. Yeah. That's what he's been asked to do for a long time, and it's been very, very successful. But when you've not got the cover in the midfield, and it kind of hurts me to do it, because see when Liverpool line up, everyone puts them up as a 4-3-3. But then you look at the heat maps and things like that and see where everybody actually is during the vast majority of the game. And it's not a 4-3-3. It's two guys at the back. It's the full-backs who are basically playing on the wings the vast majority of the time. Elliott, who we all love and is brilliant, he's a kind of 10 and a winger, which kind of starts skewing it, and it's no longer a 4-3-3, which it was before. It was something I explained the other week as well. Sadio Mane leaves. He did a different job, and he created space for Robertson to run into. He's not doing that. They've got Diaz out there, or whoever. They don't fly in as often. So Robertson's running into traffic all the time. So tiny wee changes happen, and it just takes a few of them, and then suddenly it kind of cascades. So there's a wee bit of that happening with Liverpool, but I still don't think it's massively, massively difficult to change it. And I have every expectation that Klopp will bring it back and they'll go on a great run.
Okay, do you? Okay. Michael,
the other thing is, by the way, the Ajax is going to be tough. I was at the Amsterdam Arena for the Rangers game, although Rangers did some of the worst tactical stuff you've ever seen in your life in that first half, it was just ridiculous. I mean, talking about getting tactics massively wrong, that was just Gio Van Bronckhorst. He is a good tactician, but he messed it up, and it took him 45 minutes to change it. But in that first 45 minutes, Ajax looked like the total football Ajax of old. So give Ajax space, and they will look damn brilliant, even though they've made all these changes. But close them down, and you can be made to look quite ordinary again.
Yeah. Michael Owen had the observation. He was on BT Sport after that Napoli game, and it was just a throwaway line, and he was kind of half thinking out loud, but he was saying, actually, all of these injuries, and we're talking Henderson thigh injury, he's going to be out until October, Canade knee injury, Carvalho thigh injury, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain thigh injury, lower back for Calvin Ramsey, Naby Keita thigh injury, Andy Robertson I think a leg injury now, and Curtis Jones ankle foot injury. So not all of them are soft tissue, but quite a lot of them are. And Owen was kind of making the point, a lot of these are of the training ground. Now, I'm not sure he's totally correct about that, and that quite a few of those happened in matches, but he was basically saying, I'm not sure it suits Liverpool and whatever way they're doing things, and I don't know who's in the S&C staff, but he said these 6-7 day turnarounds actually don't suit Liverpool. If they can quickly get into a rhythm now of game every 2 or 3 days, game recovery, that's their rhythm, that's where they're at their best. We don't know what's going on the training ground, but it is a lot of injuries.
It is. I have to say, I've always slightly worried about certain teams where they play extremely high tempo all the time, because everyone goes, oh, the modern players, the modern game, and they're so fit. No, they're human beings. And they'll wear out, and you'll wear them down, and you'll get more injuries when you are pushed to the limits that often. Having said that, the heavy metal football, he did step back for a good period of time, Jurgen Klopp. But the miles are on there. The miles are on the clock for quite a lot of players there. So when you're going to try and play that sort of football with that sort of intensity and that sort of pace, which they like to do, not even just when they're pressing, but when they've got the ball and when they're moving the ball as well, you really got to have a good squad, a depth of squad where people are given rests at the right time. But they're not able to do that at the moment because they've got so many injuries, which may have been caused by that. If you're now saying, by the way, James Milner, I want you to do it, 2 or 3 times a week, I don't know if he can do that.
Yeah,
I don't think he can.
Owen's point was actually more so he doesn't like maybe what they're doing in training. He thinks they're better off having 2 games a week than just the 6-7 day turnarounds.
Exactly, but it's a guess. It's just a guess.
Yeah.
I think that's a guess because every player just wants to do that because it's great fun. You don't need to train. You just go and play games and it's fantastic. But sometimes it's not the problem that looks right in front of you. It might have been a wider one that is taking a while building. And it's always been in my mind that I always worry about players like Salah. He never gets a break. He plays over summers and huge numbers of games every year. And he's just human. He's normal. He's a bloke, He's going to wipe them out at some point in time. And there have been games you watch Mo Salah, and however brilliant he is, he just looks gone, and that's not me slaughtering him. That's me saying the guy needs to be managed correctly. And I think that's the case with quite a number of the players. But that's the modern game. It may well be that footballers don't play 700, 800, 900 games anymore. They play 200, 300, 400 maximum, and get rests in between it if you're going to play at this intensity and this tempo. Because
they are being outrun and out-sprinted currently, which is a real break with tradition.
And that's the thing. You keep on. So if they're going to go and do what they did before, they need to be outrunning these teams that are younger, haven't been doing it for quite as long, that have got that intrinsic ability to lift it and run it against specific teams, whereas Liverpool, you kind of almost ask them to do it for every single game, and they've been doing it, as I say, for a long time. And a lot of those players have been there for a while. So, and it is that classic one. You go and try high pressing. Don't try it with 7 or 8. You're wasting your time. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work. You have to have every single player, with the possible exception maybe one. Everybody else must do it. And if you've not got that, and they're not able to do it to the high level, it's a mess. It's a shambles. It doesn't work.
Their problem there, as we hit on a few different things, is there's actually quite a few things for Klopp to fix then. There's the tactical side of things. There's the personnel issue and the departure of Mane, and then there's some level of fatigue of sorts, be it mental, physical. It's hard to put your finger on it, but certainly we're not seeing the same intensity. I mean, there's kind of a myriad things there for him to try and put his finger on. One is difficult, and to solve it is difficult, and maybe this break is a blessing in disguise for them.
Yeah. And this is the one that Liverpool fans will, well, I've got to say, disagree with me. They'll disagree with everything. But it kind of doesn't seem to happen as much when Henderson's fit and Henderson's around. It's really weird. And the reason why I mention that, I watch him quite a lot when he plays, and he's not always the big favourite. But I've been in dressing rooms where there is a guy, and it's not that unusual. It's the guy who gets booed first, but he's actually the soul of the team. And he's the one where he sets everybody else, and nobody switches off when he's there. I just get this feeling that Henderson and his input and his importance to it, and he's not the flashiest player, and he's not going to be the best player, and that's not the point. It's the effect that he has on every single player around him when he is actually on that field. And by the way, he's also very good at doing that covering job I was talking about before. And you just wonder if people are saying lots and lots of problems. Lots and lots of problems can be sorted quite quickly if you actually get the right one or two in the right places and get everybody doing what they're good at. Again, yeah, every team's got problems. Every team almost always has problems. But remember, often we see you get a big sitting forward who scores 35 goals a season, and then he leaves the club, and people think, well, we'll look for another one of them. Of course you don't. You look for another idea, and it may be two players that do something different. Because people always think it's the same thing that needs to fix it. And sometimes it's a simple thing that fixes it. And I suspect just getting everybody fully fit will fix it as much as anything else.
Well, for the purposes of our conversation, the latest news now is that Chelsea-Liverpool is off at 4:30 Sunday in London. So that's another break for them to try and get everybody back feeling fresh and feeling good again.
Thanks for letting me know. I was supposed to be going to that game, so thanks for letting me know.
Well, you get your Sunday afternoon off. I guess Salah has the month of December off for the World Cup, and who knows how all of that plays out, but he certainly doesn't look himself. I mean, there's a general rejection of any notion that akin to our friend Aubameyang, who we were talking about. This isn't a case of somebody who's got the big contract and said, right, I can relax now. Whether it's tiredness or something else, he's miles off where he was a year ago. Yeah,
and I do think it's when you watched at the end of Messi's career and at the end of certainly Ronaldo's career as well, they choose the times. They decide when. And it's parts of games. They decide when to run. They decide when to be explosive. They know that they can't do it all the time, and if they do it all the time, they'll just wipe themselves out. They can't do that chasing back every single time. They know they can't do it anymore because they're just going to wipe themselves out. So there's a bit of that with Salah now. Definitely a bit of that with Salah now. And by the way, I don't blame him, because the players that are with the right will, the best will in the world, want to run themselves into the ground, will do that, and then we won't. I'll run myself into the ground. But you want him up there in the front third of the field. But there seems to be a wee bit lack of explosiveness at the moment. So the hope is, and maybe the expectation is, that he does, get that explosiveness back. But you have to be careful because it can go quickly. You remember the last season of Eden Hazard when he was playing at Chelsea? And what an amazing player. And then someday he just couldn't kick a ball for Real Madrid for a long time there. Now, he scored the other night against Celtic, but an absolute shadow of the player he was. So you have to keep an eye on it when it's a fade and when it's excuse me, and when it's something else.
Yeah, well, we'll find out over the next couple of months for sure. I suspect it might be a light enough chat on Monday in terms of games over the weekend, but we'll talk to you next Monday nonetheless. Pat, thanks a mil. Cheers. Pat Nevin with us here on Monday evening. Football and Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season. Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. And again, the breaking news, Chelsea's game against Liverpool is off, and Manchester United's game against Leeds off as well. Brighton against Crystal Palace on Saturday remains postponed. So that's the latest from the Premier League as we record here.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every live Premier League game this season on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.